Transportation for Every Pedestrian course that's being offered as a series of virtual webinars during our stay-at-home order time. This is Victoria Beal with the Ohio LTAP Center, and I'm so pleased to be able to introduce my colleague, Ray Brushart, who will be your instructor for part 2 of this course. Before I turn things over to Ray, there are a couple of items I'd like to go over with you. First off, we have some handouts for you in the handout section of the GoToWebinar box. We have a handout of today's slides, and we also have a handout of pedestrian crash countermeasures. Please feel free to download those at any time during the presentation. If for some reason your computer doesn't cooperate and allow you to download them, I'll also be following up with an email after the training, sending both of those out as attachments. Secondly, we have a question pod in your GoToWebinar box, and this is how we'll be accepting comments and questions throughout today's webinar. So please go ahead and drop me a hi or hello in there just to make sure that I know that you know where it's at. We won't be taking raised hands for questions, I'm sorry, but that's just not the way that we've selected to do it with the webinar. The hello, hi's are coming in great. So it seems like most everyone's finding the question portion of the GoToWebinar box. I appreciate that. So if you do have questions or comments, feel free to put them in, and I will do my very best to read those off to Ray. Other than those two housekeeping items, I believe that's all I have for right now. So Ray, are you ready to go?
Yes, I'm ready.
Thank you.
All right, good morning, class. As Victoria was saying, my name is Ray Brushart, and I work with the Ohio LTAP Center, and I'm called what am I called? The safety circuit rider. So that's pretty catchy, isn't it? But today's class is Safe Transportation for Every Pedestrian. It's an initiative through the Everyday Counts through the Federal Highway Administration, also called STEP. And let me go ahead and share my information. I'm not sure if everybody in today's class was in part 1, but this will be part 2. There's 4 parts to this webinar series. And let's check out where we left off this past week. We left off right around here. We got into what the MUTCD, the standards involved with crosswalk markings, from the standards to guidance. And then we had a little discussion at the end about, how to select a location for a crosswalk. You want it to make sense as far as looking at land uses, origins and destinations of the pedestrian. Like in this picture, we've got apartments on one side and commercial activity stores and a bus stop over on the other side. So it just made sense to have that location right there. And we talked about some of the resources that are available for you guys to research on your own. There's one from 2005 that talked about the safety effects of marked versus unmarked crosswalks at uncontrolled locations, and with some final report and recommended guidelines. And then a 2018 guide for improving pedestrian safety at uncontrolled crossing locations. And then the one on the right, there is a table that we're going to be utilizing as part of this class, very important part of this class. And so we're going to delve into how to use that table here in just a little bit. So today we're going to start off talking about the guide for improving pedestrian safety at uncontrolled crossing locations. It's called the STEP guide. And so the STEP guide, as you can see on the right, it's a 6-step process for improving pedestrian safety at uncontrolled crossing locations. So the majority of this workshop is going to focus on step 4 of these 6 steps, which is select countermeasures. And as far as number 2 there, you see inventory conditions and prioritize locations. talk about that a little bit. The city of Seattle did not apply consistently how they installed their crosswalks. So they went back and installed their crosswalks per this table that we're going to be utilizing. And it turns out that they used to lose lawsuits when there was pedestrian crashes, but now that they've used that table, they no longer lose lawsuits. And so they actually removed some crosswalks with a stipulation that they had a priority list for future improvements. And so that is a lot like the ADA transition plans. Familiar with those. And so this is the table that I'm talking about. And it's one of the handouts if you, on the right and inside your webinar box. One of the handouts is this table. And so it's called, this is step 4, select countermeasures. And so what we have is the pedestrian crash countermeasures by roadway feature. So on the left, you have your roadway configuration. You gotta, you're selecting what type of road are you on. Are you on a 2-lane roadway, 1 lane in each direction? Are you on a 3-lane roadway, 1 lane in each direction, and a center turn lane usually? And also, it says raised median. Then you have 3 lanes without a raised median. And then the next 2 are 4+ lanes with and without a raised median. And then across the top, you've got 3 categories of your average annual daily traffic. So the first one you see is less than 9,000. The middle one is 9,000, 15,000, and then to the right, far right, is greater than 15,000. And in each one of those 3 is broken down into speed limits on those roads. So you got less than 30, 35 miles an hour, and 40 and greater for each one of those AADTs. And then inside each box is a list of countermeasures 1 through 9. And so 1, as you can see at the bottom, high visibility crosswalk markings. 2 is a raised crosswalk. 3 is advanced yield here to pedestrian sign. 4 is in-street pedestrian crossing sign. 5 is curb extensions. 6, a pedestrian refuge island. 7, rectangular rapid flashing beacon. 8, road diet, and 9, pedestrian hybrid beacon. So those are the countermeasures. And then inside each box, you see the numbers. Some numbers have no circle around them. Some have a black circle, and some have a clear circle. And as you look at the bottom left, you'll see what that means, what that signifies. So like if you see the number 1 and it's inside the dark circle, what that tells you is that signifies that this countermeasure should always be considered, but not mandated or required based upon engineering judgment at a marked uncontrolled crossing location. And then if you have a number 1 that's in an open circle, that signifies that crosswalk visibility enhancements should always occur in conjunction with other identified countermeasures. And then the absence of a number signifies that the countermeasure is generally not an appropriate treatment, but exceptions may be considered following engineering judgment. So that's what the table consists of. So like I said, it's the main feature of this course, but also the step guide. And you may notice that it does not include the LPI, leading pedestrian interval, since this step guide went along with Everyday Counts 4, which focused on uncontrolled locations. Okay, so, and then here is some table 2, safety issues addressed per countermeasure. So as you go down there, yes.
I don't know if it's just me, but can you move your microphone a little bit closer to your mouth? Because I think we could improve our sound quality a little bit here. Try it now.
Maybe I need to.
Closer.
Is this better?
Yeah, that's definitely better. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, so this is a table. On the left, it shows you the pedestrian crash countermeasure for uncontrolled crossings. And then across the top is the safety issue addressed by that particular countermeasure. So when you're reviewing your crash data, you can see which one of this list of countermeasures on the right would best address the issue, you know, that is being noted in your crash data, so you know which countermeasure to select. So let's go ahead and do a quiz. Like a quiz, it's actually just a little practice using this guide. And so we have a question at the top of the screen. It says, what step treatment or treatments would you install in this particular situation? So we're on a 35 mile per hour speed limit roadway. The roadway consists of 4 lanes with a 2-way left turn lane. And the average daily traffic is 14,500. So class, I want you to see if you can figure out.
And they should put their answers in the question box?
Yeah, let's put some questions to get a little practice using the question box as well. You can just put the numbers of them. You don't have to type in the whole answer, just the number associated with it.
All right.
And any comments?
Somebody said 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Next person said 3, 7, 9, 1, 3, 6, 7, 9, 1, 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This almost reminds me of that 80s song, you know, 8, 6, 7, 5. Sorry. All right. Ray frequently breaks out a song in our office.
Anytime you mention 80s music, it just puts me in a good mood. So thanks for that.
Yeah. You're welcome. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. 1, 3, 6, 9, 7. 1, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9. They seem to be pretty consistently given the same numbers here.
Okay, well let's talk about this a little bit. It says 4 lanes with a 2-way left turn lane. So that means that there is no raised median. So make sure you're using that. Make sure you're using the speed limit of 35. And then also the AADT, get it in the correct range. Because I've heard the number 5, and 5 is not one that's in this box for this situation. So you really need to look at the darkened circle or the open circle. If it's not circled, then it's saying that that countermeasure is generally not an appropriate treatment. So let's try again. If you're one of the people that put 5 in your answer, let's see if we can do it again.
The most recent answers don't have 5 in them.
Okay.
There we go. And so everybody knows I am uploading the slides from part 1's webinar last Thursday into the handout box, since Ray started with slides that were prior to the first one we had on today's handout. So that should be available now if you'd like to download it. Yeah, everybody's just saying 1, 3, 6, 7, 9. So there you go, Ray.
And then the predominant one that is a for sure treatment is what number?
Well, we're getting some comments here. It says, the table says that any number listed is a candidate treatment. It's not clear that 5 shouldn't be used. But the majority of the people said that the predominant treatment should be 1.
Yes, the predominant treatment is 1, which is high visibility crosswalk markings. So if I'm looking right, so we want, watch my arrow on the screen. So we got 35 miles per hour. So we got 3 choices for that. But it's the ADT is 14,500. So we're in this range, barely. I was waiting for somebody to say, well, in the planning community, maybe it's borderline 15,000. So maybe we should be selecting the far right one. So it is borderline, so who knows? Maybe we could pick the far right one. I guess we'd have to ask somebody about the trend of the population maybe. Is it trending upward or trending downward? Then we have, make sure we got the proper roadway. So 4 lanes without a raised median is what we want. So if we go into this 35-mile-per-hour one here in the middle, we see number 1 with the open circle. So we should always consider that one in this situation. And then here we go, 3, 6, 7, and 9 should always be considered. What's the difference between this one and this one? At the higher speed, at the higher volume one, we see that 7 has been eliminated totally. So the rectangular rapid flashing beacon is not even a consideration once we hit the 15,000 daily traffic. It went bye-bye. So maybe we shouldn't even use it at the 14,500 then. We have to think about that. That would be some engineering judgment. So we have to consider that in the study.
One thing we can do too, Ray, is we can definitely take some of these comments and ship them over to Peter Un and see if we can get a response from him before Thursday's webinar too.
Okay.
So, but yeah, some people had comments about numbers not listed in a category are generally not appropriate. But yet somebody else said that they agree that all the numbers should be considered. Otherwise, why wouldn't 1 through 9 be in all the boxes? So.
Oh, I see. Well, over here on the left it has the hat, so the number stuff. So if the number is even in there, it says signifies that the countermeasure is a candidate treatment of a marked uncontrolled. So it is a candidate. All right. I've been corrected. See, I'm easy that way. Okay, let's move on. Now that we've had our practice, this is I guess I could have turned the page so we could actually have a little easier time of looking at it there. There's the blow up of this table. Okay, so now let's get to the fun stuff, which is the treatments. And we call these treatments the spectacular 7. So we refer to them as the spectacular 7. And I guess what you could do with that term is kind of play off of the Marvel or DC comic superheroes. You know, because we think of these as they are spectacular in the fact that they save lives. And even the RRFB, the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, it actually died and came back to life, because when it first came out, everybody was really gung-ho about it, and then all of a sudden they said, uh-oh, no, we're not. And then after further review, it's back on the list. So it actually came back to life like a superhero. So that's why we refer to these as the spectacular 7. So when I say spectacular 7, I'm talking about this list right here, from crosswalk visibility enhancements, raised crosswalks, pedestrian refuge island, the RRFB, PHB, pedestrian hybrid beacon, road diets, and the leading pedestrian interval. So first on the list we want to talk about is the crosswalk visibility enhancements. We're going to start off with them because we introduced these from the simple and lower cost countermeasures to more complex and higher cost countermeasures. Simple and complex can refer to both the device or the roadway. Road diets is down at towards the bottom, even though it could fall under lower costs if it's planned ahead to where they are doing a resurfacing project. However, it really wraps things up well, since it has many benefits to all modes and allows many of the treatments to be installed, like median crossing islands and curb extensions. Reducing the number of lanes also reduces or eliminates the multi-threat situation, which in turn can keep an agency from using higher cost treatments like the PHB. And if you notice on the screen in the lower right is the tech sheet that goes along. For each one of these Spectacular 7s has its own tech sheet, and you can check out those on the EDC STEP website. So there are several items that fall under crosswalk visibilities enhancements, which we're going to be covering all these in the upcoming slides. But I think maybe I can show you a cool video that shows these before we even go into that. So let's see if I can get this video to work for you.
Just remember to unmute yourself at the end, Ray.
Okay. Takes a few seconds to upload. Oh, wait, I gotta do this.
Okay, Ray. I can't hear you
Okay.
talking. There we go.
Okay.
Now I can hear you.
Can you see, is the screen right? Do I have a slide up there?
No, we're still seeing the
Oh.
video. So you need to reload your slide.
Oh. Where's my box at?
Go
There
up
it
to the
is.
sharing box. There you
There
go.
we go.
All right, now we see the slide. Great.
Okay, that was a pretty good video, wasn't it? So it showed a lot of these on this list in that video. In fact, I think it showed all of those, so it's pretty good. So crosswalk visibility enhancements. Here we see in the picture some treatments listed on the prior slide. And many of these treatments can be installed in combination with others. So here we see curb extensions, high visibility markings, overhead lighting, and in-street signs on a 2-lane roadway. And of course, the MUTCD, they have standards involved with the pavement markings for crosswalks. I'm not going to read every word on the slide. There are references there for you after you get back to your office to read. But the one thing to point out here is sometimes we need to go beyond the minimum. So the standards that are listed in the bold letters are the standards. That's the minimum. And then the guidance and options detail how you would enhance the safety above and beyond the minimum. So let's take a look at some differences here with crosswalk visibility enhancements. So let's look at a high visibility crosswalks. These two pictures show us two different types of crosswalks. We have the two parallel lines on the left, and on the right we see the staggered continental pavement markings. They're sometimes referred to as piano keys. So the top images are what the pedestrian sees, and then the bottom images are what the driver sees. So it's harder to see the two parallel lines on the left, especially with the shadowing involved in the tree. And also you can, if you remember from our speed video in round 1 of this webinar, we had a cool video from Australia showing the difference that when the driver slows down just 3 miles per hour as they approach a high visibility crosswalk. So maybe someone seeing the high visibility crosswalk on the right, it just might slow down those 3 miles per hour and make a difference. So there was a crosswalk visibility study conducted back in 2010. And so the objective was to investigate relative daytime and nighttime visibility of 3 different crosswalk patterns: the transverse lines, which are those 2 lines on the left on the previous screen, and then continental and bar pairs. They're kind of similar looking, but there are some differences. And so this study, delved into researching if there's any significant differences as far as being for the driver to detect these as they approach. And so there were 78 participants, about evenly divided between groups of male and female participants and between groups of younger and older, when the younger than 55 and older than 55. And so they used instrumented vehicles on an open road route on the Texas A&M University campus. And data was collected during the day, and it had to be either sunny and clear or at the most partly cloudy, and nighttime with the street lights on. And so existing markings at 6 intersections and 2 mid-block locations, and then new markings installed for this study at 9 mid-block locations were tested. And so for the sites where markings were newly installed for this study, the detection distances to the bar pairs and continental markings were similar, and they were statistically different from the detection distance to transverse markings, both during the day and at night. And so for the existing mid-block locations, a general observation was that the continental markings were detected at about twice the distance upstream as the transverse markings during daytime conditions. This increase in distance reflected 8 seconds of increased awareness of the presence of the crossing at 30 mile per hour operating speeds. So that was very significant. So here's some more pictures from this study. So you had the top picture shows us the transverse markings. The middle picture is the installed continental markings. And then the bottom picture is the installed bar pair markings. And so the conclusions of the study, like I said, the continental and bar pairs statistically different from the transverse lines. And the general observation for the mid-block, like I said, they were detected about twice the distance upstream as transverse during daytime conditions. So an increase in distance reflects 8 seconds of increased awareness of the presence of the crossing at 30 miles per hour operating speed. And the participants preferred the continental and bar pairs over transverse. And the participants gave continental and bar pairs similar ratings during both day and night. And transverse ratings differed based on the light level. Those are some conclusions from that study. So let's take a look as to how it is possible for the continental and bar pairs to provide greater visibility. As we see in this picture, see what the driver sees. So he can pick up, he can detect that lateral 12-inch stripe at a distance of 300 feet. But you see the angle is different because of how the bar pairs are laid out there. So it's easier to see from that distance. Okay, so those are the crosswalk stripings there. Now let's take a look at textured crosswalks. How effective are they? So the next 5 slides, we're going to cover this issue as we're seeing more of these textured crosswalks due to agencies wanting aesthetically pleasing roadways. So the images during the public meetings look great, but one needs to consider them long-term as shown on the next couple of slides. So they do look very pretty in this picture. But in reality, after a period of time, this is what the pedestrian sees. So the crosswalks, they tend to blend into the roadway after a bit of time. Also, there is a crosswalk, but it's not marked. So technically, we need 2 parallel lines for you to call it a marked crosswalk. So as installed in this picture, it's an unmarked crosswalk. So you don't really see it very well. And here's one with bricks. So you have your brick crosswalks. Turns out they are prone to failure after a little bit of time, as you can see. So they can be difficult for wheelchair users. So one of the things we need to consider when we make these decisions is maintenance of this roadway. So maintenance should always be considered. And in this case, maintenance people need to have a saw. In addition, people in the wheelchairs, they feel the bumps a lot. And can you imagine if someone's trying to cross the street if they had spinal injuries? So you have to consider that.
Ray, there's a question in the question box,
okay.
And I'm not sure if we have the answer to this, but are brick crosswalks ADA compliant? We can always find out.
Yeah, I mean, they had to get approved somehow, but I don't know.
Yeah, we'll dig into that one. Let me email a couple people while we're on here.
They're probably ADA compliant when they install them. It's just a matter of, as you can see, what happens over time.
I didn't have to email anybody. Here's the answer from another one of the
Okay.
participants. It
All
says,
right.
yes, they are ADA compliant if there's no bump greater than a ½ inch.
Aha.
So I would imagine that has to have ongoing monitoring then.
Hey, I went to
The
Ohio
person-
University in Athens, Ohio, so I'm all about brick streets.
They do say that over time the bumps tend to worsen.
Yeah, I would say.
You have to have a good maintenance program.
Mm-hmm. So here's we can supplement textured crosswalks with white lines to increase visibility. So sometimes a community insists on colored crosswalks. And so in that case, they can use stamped or painted brick patterns. And then we did that in downtown Columbus by City Hall on Front Street. So we need the 2 lateral white lines to be compliant with the MUTCD to establish a legally marked crosswalk. Okay, let's see. Class, let's take a look at these pictures here and you tell me if these are MUTCD compliant. Go ahead and put your hand.
Yeah, they're responding. I'm hopeful this means that quite a few of them have also seen the webinar we hosted on compliant webinars. One person said yes because they stand out very well, but the majority of the people are saying no. And some people said they look good, but they don't appear compliant. Some people are saying that the zipper, no, the yellow, yes.
Okay.
Another person said yellow is not an approved color.
Well, they are
No
pretty though.
General
right,
sense seems to be no.
Okay. Okay, so normally the responses are mixed, but it turns out neither of these are compliant. So on my next slide, I'm going to provide the text of an interpretation memo from the MUTCD team on this issue. Crosswalks are traffic control devices, and if confusion occurs, and if someone gets killed, the agency who has jurisdiction would probably lose the lawsuit. And of course, there are probably more MUTCDs, the manuals, on lawyers' desks than engineers' desks. So here's what the MUTCD says this issue. So there's a lot to read there. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the key point would be that if 2 white reflectorized lines anywhere from 6 inches to 24 inches wide and 6 feet apart exists, and the declaration between them is subdued, it may be compliant, but that design is discouraged. And so this is a ruling from the MUTCD on August 15th, 2013 regarding colored pavement in crosswalks. In the late 1990s, the marketplace introduced and promoted aesthetic treatments for urban streetscape environments that included the opportunity to install a range of colors and a multitude of patterns. The most popular opportunity to implement these treatments was between the legally marked transverse lines of crosswalks. This was typically done as part of larger efforts by cities to enhance the aesthetics of an area that could include decorative luminaires, street furniture, sidewalk art, etc. These crosswalk treatments were publicized and marketed as a method to increase conspicuity of the crosswalk that would translate into increased safety and a reduction of pedestrian deaths. In December 2001, the FHWA issued its first official ruling regarding the use of these aesthetic treatments, which concluded that crosswalk enhancements of this type had no such discernible effect on safety or crash reduction. The evolution of crosswalk treatments continued into the form of crosswalk art because it was becoming a common misconception that as long as the white transverse lines were present, thereby legally marking the crosswalk, then the agency was free to treat the interior portion of the crosswalk as desired. In 2011, the FHWA issued an additional official ruling that crosswalk art defined as any free-form design to draw attention to the crosswalk would degrade the contrast of the white transverse lines against the composition of the pavement beneath it. In deviating from previous official rulings on the matter that concluded an increased factor of safety and decreased number of pedestrian deaths were not evident after installation. This 2011 official ruling stated that the use of crosswalk art is actually contrary to the goal of increased safety and most likely could be a contributing factor to a false sense of security for both motorists and pedestrians. So also the FHWA's position has always been and continues to be that subdued colored aesthetic treatments between the legally marked transverse crosswalk lines are permissible, provided that they are devoid of retroreflective properties and that they do not diminish the effectiveness of the legally required white transverse pavement markings used to establish the crosswalk. So patterns or colors that degrade the contrast of the white transverse pavement markings establishing the crosswalk are to be avoided. Okay. All right, so those are the pavement markings. So let's see if there's any other questions about the markings. If not, we're going to go into the next treatment, which are the warning signs. So of course there is a section in the MUTCD about pedestrian warning signs. So these may be used to, yes.
There's a question about says, do we know if the art crosswalks have an impact of vehicle speeds? And then there's another question about, could you point us to a source on the effectiveness of crosswalk art? So I'm gonna go ahead and put some additional resources in the chat box. I know you need to keep going with the content of the course, but just to address this issue, and I'm also going to put in there a link to a webinar that the two national Federal Highway and MUTCD experts did for us last year, a link to that webinar too, as additional resources to answer these questions. Thanks.
I do have a list of, quickly I'll go, there's a list of examples of acceptable treatments, and those are brick lattice patterns, paving bricks, paving stones, cobbles or other resources designed to simulate such paving. Acceptable colors for these materials would be red, rust, brown, burgundy, clay, and tan or similar earth tone equivalents.
Yep. Yeah, and I believe that list is included in some of the resources that I'll be posting.
Okay.
So I'll put those into the chat box and I'll send them out as a follow-up email too. Thanks.
All right. Okay, so these signs, you see some examples of pedestrian warning signs here. And one's yellow, one's fluorescent yellow-green. And so it says a fluorescent yellow-green background may be used for this sign or plaque. So these can enhance the crosswalk, and using the ahead plaque can provide advanced warning to let drivers slow down. We can enhance these with embedded LEDs in the signs. So, for instance, embedded LEDs in a stop sign has been studied, and it shows when you use them, there's a 28.9% reduction in the number of vehicles not fully stopping. So that's good. And then even better than that is about a 53% reduction of vehicles moving through the intersection without significantly slowing. So there's some pictures there, and also a link to find more information about the LEDs. So the sign on the left is the W11-2. So it can be enhanced with LED around the borders, which can be powered via solar. And these beacons should be hot response activated, so they're not on 24/7. So I could ask you a question here. When a beacon is on 24/7, what tends to happen to driver behavior? So if the beacons are flashing constantly, what happens to driver behavior? The answer is
complacency. Sorry, I had to unmute myself.
Yeah.
They're putting all kind of answers in here. Drivers ignore them, lose effectiveness, they get used to it, complacency, don't pay attention.
Right. So yes, those who drive the road regularly tend to ignore it when they don't see people using it. So there's not a crash reduction factor right now, but we know the stop sign and the curve signs are somewhat effective. So there's currently some research going on right now. It might even be done. They were undergoing the research back in October 2019.
Someone even said that they have the one on the far left and it is ignored.
Maybe they can change it to a hot response. Let's take a look here. Looks like some sort of underground parking garage, but it has a pedestrian crossing. Or so like, it's like a drive where people drop off. It might be, I don't know, it's a parking garage apparently. Let's see what these, I want you to focus on the LEDs here. I'll even do it one more time.
You might just have to narrate it, Ray, because it's kind of running slow.
Oh, is it? All right, well. So if you note, there's two signs there, one on the right and one on the left. But the one on the right is much brighter than the other. Maybe the angle makes a big difference. But the cost can vary from $300 to $2,000 depending on what hardware you're buying. They sell just the border and solar to install onto existing signs. If using APS push buttons, follow the recommendations in the RRFB interim approval, which will be discussed in the RRFB section. So we touched on this a little bit in part one. Let's go ahead and talk about it some more. The multiple threat crash location. This has to do with multiple lane roadways, like 4 lanes or more. So in this picture, you see car A on the right. It stops to let a pedestrian cross, but it's stopping right up at the crosswalk. And in doing so, it blocks the sight lines that the pedestrian has of the next through lane. And then the driver of the second car does not stop because he doesn't see the pedestrian. So he ends up, the pedestrian, they don't see each other at all. So the pedestrian walks right out in front of the car that's going at a high speed. And so we need to figure out how to prevent this multiple threat situation from happening. And so we're going to look at the next few slides and we're going to cover a low cost treatment to prevent this from happening. So here we have an advanced stop or yield line. So we can see car A on the right, it stops further back away from the crosswalk and it opens up the sight lines for both the pedestrian and the motorist. So the second car can be seen by the pedestrian. In most cases, the crash is avoided because the pedestrian stepped back and took evasive action. Rarely can a car traveling at 40 miles per hour stop in time if the driver has to react at the last second. Some states have a yield for pedestrians law, so that is also shown on the next slide. So here's what the MUTCD says about some examples of yield lines at unsignalized mid-block crosswalks. So there's some guidance for the shark tooth stop bar or yield bar to be anywhere from 20 to 50 feet back. And so this is the MUTCD with that range, 20 to 50, but many agencies use 30 feet. So depending on the law, agencies will use one or the other, but it is a shall condition as shown by the language in the MUTCD on the next slide. So the shall is a standard, so that's up here. So it says yield here to stop here for pedestrians. Signs shall be used if yield or stop lines are used in advance of a marked crosswalk that crosses an uncontrolled multi-lane approach. The stop here for pedestrian signs shall only be used where the law specifically requires that a driver must stop for a pedestrian in a crosswalk. The legend state law may be displayed at the top of the R1-5 signs if applicable. So then they even have guidance and options to go above and beyond that as well. So here's a picture of the yield here for pedestrian shark tooth line. You can see it here. States with a yield to pedestrian law should adopt the shark's teeth yield line rather than a stop bar. Also, to discourage passing a stopped vehicle, double white lines can be used prior to the yield or stop bars. Like that. See it again. So here's an advanced stop line and sign. So the use of a stop line in this manner is not specifically addressed in the MUTCD. However, the MUTCD states that stop lines are used to indicate the point at which the stop is intended or required to be made. And it does not state that stop lines cannot be used for this purpose. States with a stop for pedestrian law should use advanced stop lines. So this is for uncontrolled locations, so not where a stop sign is installed. Otherwise, it would be a required double stop. Next, we have our in-street pedestrian crossing signs, R1-6 or R1-6A. One's yield, the other stop. Does anybody in the class today have any experience with these signs? These have been around long enough where a lot of agencies are already using them. If you are using them, are they installed on a 40-mile-per-hour roadway?
We have one person that said yes, but they don't have them installed on a 40-mile-per-hour roadway.
Well, that's good. That's
Other
a good
people
thing.
use them if possible. Generally in school zones, we have used them on 35-mile-per-hour and at roundabouts. On 30-mile-per-hour roadway that most people still go 40, still doesn't help. I've
Okay,
heard
so yes.
local agencies hate them as they get hit a lot and have to be replaced. I'm just reading general comments.
We're going to talk about that. There's other ways to, there's a better way to install them. I'll show them here in a minute.
Okay.
So yeah, 40 miles per hour and higher, we shouldn't be using these. So so that's to reinforce that all these treatments have their appropriate applications. Remember our table breaks it down into different speeds. Once again, the use of the signs depends on state or local law. So here's some MUTCD standards with these signs. They shall be placed in the roadway at the crosswalk location on the center line on a lane line or on a median island. They shall not be post-mounted on the left-hand or right-hand side of the roadway. Unless placed on a physical island, the sign support shall be designed to bend over and then bounce back to its normal vertical position when struck by a vehicle. The top of the sign placed in an island shall be a maximum of 4 feet above the island surface. So the MUTCD is a national standard. Of course, every state has the options to tweak that the way they see fit, as long as it's very close to that. So one might ask the question, since many of the think that the manual and uniform traffic control devices is guidance, it says here that the MUTCD is not a guidance document. There is guidance in the manual, but the manual itself is the national standard. With that said, this slide shows the conditions the in-street sign can be used. So we're going to take a look at the next few slides that show an application where the agency had to go through the experimental process using these signs in a manner not originally intended but effective.
There was a question that came in. So did you say not to use at or above 40 or 45 miles per hour?
I said to not use at 40 or above.
And then another person mentioned that Michigan uses a variation that says quote unquote local law, as there is no state law referencing mid-block crossings. Okay.
And of course, Michigan is probably like Ohio. Ohio is a home rule state, so the cities and villages, they're in charge of their roadways with their standards. It's good to develop some standards in writing when you do that. So this slide is it's called the in-street gateway treatment, and it's promoted by AASHTO. And on their website, it provides some resources about this. But you can see from the picture on the right, it is using the in-street signs on both sides of the traveled way, therefore the name gateway treatment. In some configurations, like the one shown in the picture, they use a delineator post on the dividing line. The configuration in the photo is not MUTCD compliant, and therefore the state had to go through the MUTCD experimental process. The in-street sign being in the gutter is not currently allowed. This will all change in the next edition of the MUTCD based upon this research. Now, I guess we're all waiting for the next MUTCD to come along, since 2009 was the last one for the national and 2012 was the last one for Ohio. But there's some good resources and links there. You can Google pedestrian gateway treatment technical memo, and you could even find a presentation on it, gateway treatment for pedestrian crossings presentation. And there's a user guide for R1-6 gateway treatment for pedestrian crossing. So here's some research abstract key points on this. It says when used, there is an increase in the percentage of drivers yielding to pedestrians at mid-block and multi-lane urban and suburban locations from a 15 to 70%, and that these increases endured without any decrement over the spring, summer, and fall of 2016. Speed data collected at each site showed 4 to 5 mile per hour reduction in the mean when motorists traversed the crosswalk when pedestrians were absent. These speed changes persisted over time. An additional study showed that placing the signs between 5, 10, 20, 30, and 50 feet in advance of the crosswalk were equally effective, and they enticed drivers to yield further ahead of the crosswalk. So the second one brings us back to the speed video from Australia we looked at in the first part of the webinar. So, you know, the speed video we showed how important it was for drivers to slow down by even 3 miles per hour. And so this one is showing that showing an average of 4 to even 5 mile per hour reduction of speed before they got there. So that makes a big difference on, you know, if a pedestrian is going to get hit, you know, it's a big difference between no injury and a serious injury or worse. So here's some more abstract key points. It says signs mounted on a curb type mount with a flexible rubber attachment all survived, while only 58% of the flush mounted signs with a pivoting base survived. So if the person that says they're having problems keeping these installed, you might want to look at the type of hardware that's being used to attach them. So they're recommending that you use a curb type mount with a flexible rubber attachment instead of the flush mounted signs with a pivoting base. And then it says none of the signs mounted on top of the edge of a curb on a refuge island or median island curb extension or the curb on the edge of the roadway under FHWA permission to experiment were destroyed or damaged. So maintenance, again, should always be considered, and this report shows which types of mounts as well as locations had a higher survivability rate. So there's some things to think about there. So in this picture, we've got one example from the user's guide where it shows the configuration and other relevant information. So this is says a 3-lane roadway configuration without a refuge island. And it goes into their findings here, the yielding compliance between 60 and 90% compliance rate if speed limit is 30 miles per hour or less for ADT up to 25,000. If the speed limit is 35 miles per hour, expect similar results if ADT is 12,000 or less. So that's the limit of that. It gives you some approximate costs. $1,200 for materials, 20-minute installation, 8 minutes to remove for winter, 8 minutes to reinstall in spring. So it says by installing the gateway on the near side of the intersection, both crosswalks are covered with only 4 signs. Data show that a gateway at the near side crosswalk continues to be effective for the far side of the intersection, as the motorist on the far side has already passed through a gateway on the near side. Okay, so that's what I have for our gateway treatment. Now let's talk about our crosswalk visibility enhancements for curb extensions. So the next 12 slides, I'm going to show you some curb extensions. They can be installed at intersections or mid-block. So there's some good landscaping and street furniture there as well in the curb extension. Okay, so most curb extensions of them focus on reduced crossing distance for the pedestrian. So let's see what happens when I click here. So we've been, see how I installed that? Say it again. Currently there's 58 feet for the pedestrian to cross. With this design of a curb extension, we necked it down to 32 feet. So with that, you have some advantages. You have better visibility between peds and motorists. It's a traffic calming device, and there's room for street furniture. So curb extension should be the width of the parking lane and should not encroach on bike lanes or travel lanes. So anytime you have permanent parking, there is the opportunity to put in curb extensions. So there's also two different radius designs. The one on the right may be easier for street sweepers, while the one on the left might have to be hand swept. So when designing, talk with maintenance and what their trucks can do. That's something to consider. So they even configure the parking differently here. So this one shows how you have better visibility when you draw the pedestrian in closer. They can see better around the parked car. And the green vegetation should not block the line of sight. So special attention should be paid to regarding your trees, type of trees you have. Curb extensions enable signs to be moved in. So you can see the stop signs. Stop sign up here on the right is out of view. And now with the curb extension, we brought the stop sign in. So it's win-win situation for pedestrians and drivers. So it definitely improves the safety for all road users. How about the drainage of the roadway? How is this going to impact drainage? Drainage is always an issue and can definitely raise costs once you determine that drainage needs to be upgraded or re-engineered. But when we with the curb extensions, you can see how the drainage grate are placed in this picture here. Doesn't look like they moved the drainage grate in that situation. There's a drainage solution, same as before, plus a plate. It says covering the gap with a plate allows for the curb extension to function as a normal curb extension with the curb ramps on the curb extension. So there's an advantage to this because the cross slope of the roadway will typically result in a shorter ramp than usual. Let's be talking about up here. Let's see, here's a before picture. Road looks and feels really wide. So this is how the street looked before reconstruction, much wider. It has the same capacity, but is less safe. This photo was taken from the last curb extension of the built project. And afterwards, it says curb extension integral to sidewalk. Street looks narrow, even with no parked cars. So in this one, we've got examples that further illustrate this concept from a different perspective. In both images, the valley gutter provides a natural buffer between the parking and the travel lanes, which is especially important in the upper left image as a buffer to the bike lane. So this one up here has a bike lane. Fixed objects. Ballards, planters, and other fixed objects may be placed at the back of curb to protect pedestrians and prevent vehicles from driving onto the sidewalk. So this is an innovative idea for the use of a curb extension. Cafe seating that's not blocking the pedestrian zone of the sidewalk. Here's some paint and delineator posts. This paint is not a good substitute for a raised or physical curb extension. Unfortunately, motorists can easily drive over paint. The delineators in the upper left corner, we're at here, over here, should be added. Otherwise, cars may not know that it's a curb extension and will drive right over it. This provides no benefit to pedestrians. Look at the planters down here in the lower picture. Planters supplement delineators well, but watering and other maintenance is needed to keep them looking good. Inexpensive bulb outs can be made from temporary curbs that may or may not include posts. These are ways to provide a quick and low-cost visual or physical bulb out without affecting drainage. Delineator posts can only sustain a few hits before they need to be replaced. These posts should be monitored. Overall, raised curbs work the best. How about if we don't have a curb extension or it's not even a possibility? One thing you can do is limit parking near a crosswalk. So on-street parking should be restricted at least 20 feet in advance of the crosswalk to allow for good visibility of pedestrians. So the treatment of a parking lane approaching an intersection requires special consideration. If the lane is carried up to the intersection, right-turning vehicles may use it in the absence of parked vehicles, potentially leading to undesirable operations. However, keeping a parking lane can increase the effective corner radius for large right-turning vehicles. The other options include using a parking lane transition, like a bulb out as shown, like a painted bulb out, or prohibiting parking a certain distance from the intersection. So up here we had a parking spot right up by the intersection, and then the parking spot was eliminated. 20 feet usually the 20 to 22 feet is usually the length of a parking spot. So this gives, as you can see, a good sight distance from the pedestrian seeing the oncoming vehicle. A lot of discussion gets into the size of your curb radius. A lot of cities have their own standard size of a radius. And the problem with the standard size is it usually favors the vehicle without considering the needs of the pedestrian. So when you're a pedestrian, a large radius, it increases the crossing distance, and it makes the crosswalk and ramp placement more difficult. So design guides point out the obvious consequence of a large corner radii along crosswalks, but there are other negative consequences. They pull the intersection apart and make it hard to place ramps and crosswalks where pedestrians want to cross. I know we need to accommodate trucks, but oftentimes agencies may have a default corner radius that's designed more with the truck in mind rather than a pedestrian. So we encourage having a smaller default radius and making it larger to accommodate trucks, which is a concept of complete streets. So let's see how we can accommodate both here. So here we have a truck making a right turn with this large radius, and it makes it hard to figure out where to cross. So the pickup truck So this is a camper. It's going straight, and then this pickup truck's making a right turn. So this pickup truck behind the camper is looking left due to the gap provided and may start accelerating before even realizing that there's a pedestrian trying to cross. So in this picture, let's see how we can deal with this. We want to minimize the curb radius with a truck apron. Let's see what I did here. So we got two radii in this picture. We got the effective radius and then the actual curb radius. So R1 is this actual curb radius. R2 is much larger because the car is turning from this lane, not this lane. So we're driving it from, measuring it from there. So R2 is much larger if they're turning not from the curb lane, but from the next lane over. So the travel lanes offset from the curb with the parking and or bike lane. So here we see the effective curb radius. So we got a bus in the picture, another big log truck, and we can see they are making this tight turn and they're not driving over the curb. Which is good. And then sometimes we can install a truck apron as an option to help out with these larger vehicles. So the picture we see is a retrofit that you can do to accommodate larger trucks, but keep smaller vehicles from making fast right turns. So we're using a modern roundabout truck apron design, 2 to 3 inches high. It's got a different color and pavement roughness to the roadway and sidewalk. The crosswalk should go all the way to the sidewalk, so the truck apron is not confused with a curb extension. Okay, so those are some treatments there involving the radius and curb extensions. Then next, let's get into crosswalk visibility enhancements, and we'll do that with crosswalk lighting. You saw that in the video at the beginning of these. So lighting always adds safety to anything. We would love to have lighting in all of our 2-lane rural roadway curves if we could. But when we add lighting to our crosswalks, we show a crash reduction factor anywhere from 42 to 59%. And so we can accommodate impaired drivers with guardrail, rumble strips, clear zones, etc. But what can we do for impaired pedestrians that also benefit all pedestrians? And that is lighting. So being able to detect someone at night sooner might provide that 3-mile-per-hour difference between a fatal and minor injury. So there was a study done that resulted in this informational report on lighting design for mid-block crosswalks. And lighting is complex. So this information in this lighting report provides some general recommendations for pedestrian crosswalk lighting. As we read this slide, might want to know what an LX is referring to. It's a lux. A lux is a measurement of light. So vertical illuminance of 20 lux in the crosswalk measured at a height of 5 feet from the road surface provided adequate detection distances in most circumstances. So when we talk about lighting over crosswalks, the old way of doing it was the traditional mid-block crosswalk lighting layout. We had to light directly
Hey, Ray,
over. Yes.
I just wanted to let you know you've got 10 minutes till 11:30.
Okay.
Thanks.
So instead of installing the light post directly over the crosswalk, we want people to switch to the new design for mid-block crosswalk lighting layout, which is, you know, when a car is approaching, the light here is actually lighting up. The edge of the light is over here, but they're lighting up the entire roadway even before the crosswalk. So they're doing that from both sides. So it provides more light to the approaching motorists in both directions. All right, so let's look at a short clip here of a longer video, which I recommend everyone watch, but it talks about adaptive solar lighting, which could be a viable option in many parts of the country where running power might be expensive. The lighting is along the road, but could be used for crossings as well. We have not been able to track down a price for just a pair. So I don't know if has anybody in the audience of today's class, anybody had experience with this?
You know, Ray, actually just play the video. Let's keep going.
Okay.
Because
All right.
I'm worried about you getting through the content right now.
Okay.
They're an incredibly interactive group. We love that. We can't hear the sound, so you're going to need to narrate this for us.
Oh.
Ray, if you're narrating it for us, you're on mute.
Well, no, I was letting you listen to it.
Oh no, we can't hear it at all.
Okay, you can't hear it. All right.
So just move on.
Well,
We'll send the link out to everybody.
It's adaptive solar lighting. It stays on at 25% power, and then as you approach, it detects you and goes up to 100% power. That was the gist of it. But you can adapt that, even though they're showing along the roadway. You could adapt that and to install that for crossings as well. So those were the different crosswalk visibility enhancements as part of the Spectacular 7. And then we have the next would be, I guess we could start there on Thursday, start with raised crosswalks. You want to do some polling questions, or want me to keep going through some slides, Victoria?
No, we can go ahead and do polling questions. I know you wanted to get through a little bit more, but it seems like a good spot to stop. Let me go ahead and get the polls put up. And I do have quite a few questions that I'm going to send to you through Teams that have come in the last few minutes. But I knew you had quite a bit to still get through. So which one do you want to start with? The 2010 study question?
I think I had them in order that I went through.
Okay, we'll start with that one. And I did shorten that one up just a little bit. Study of 2010, continental markings were detected about twice the distance upstream as transverse markings. Sorry guys, that definitely looks kind of different there. But we're collecting answers. So hopefully they get it right and it's not my fault for having messed up the way it was asked. All right, and we do have some answers coming in through the question box too, which they are also citing with the people who are voting on the higher percentage right now. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that one up and share it. And we had 87% and everyone in the box say true, and then 13% said false. So Ray, your comments on that one?
It's true.
All right, I'm going to launch the next question.
So it's kind of like, why should we ever use just the 2 white lines anymore? I mean, that's part of the reason for this class is, you know, let's go with what is tried and true and actually works. And so the continental and mixed pairs, they work a lot better than just the 2 white lines. So.
All right, so the next question is, this increase in distance reflects 8 seconds of increased awareness of the presence of the crossing at a set mile per hour, and you're to choose the mile per hour, which they are definitely choosing. So, all right, I'm going to close the poll up and share that. We've got 9% said 25, 29% said 30, 54% said 35, and 9% said 45.
The answer is 30. It's based on a speed of 30 miles per hour.
All right. Let's see if we can get another poll question in here.
And again, that was through Texas A&M, they do a lot of research that ends up being put into the MUTCD on lots of different subjects.
Okay, the next one, which of the following are advantages for installing curb extensions? We've got a good number of people voting for the same answer, and people are also putting that same answer in the question box.
What was the question? I can't see the question.
I know, I'm sorry. Which of the following are advantages for installing curb extensions?
Oh.
I'm going to close that poll up and share the results. 98% said all of the above. And then,
yes, that's correct. That's correct.
Okay, good. There we go. We'll do one more before we wrap things up. Launching this one. Okay, the larger the radius is at an intersection crosswalk, the safer it is for a pedestrian. True or false? Boy, they're voting fast and furious on this one. Okay, I'm going to close it out, and we have 12% that said true and 88% that said false. Why is it false, Ray?
It's false because couple reasons. It makes it a wider area for the pedestrian to cross the street, and then a lot of times the motorists, as they're making the turn, they don't see the pedestrian until they're almost like right up on them.
Okay, well, we've only got a minute left, so a couple of wrap-up items. First off, I did try to send the slides to everybody already, but apparently the files are rather large, so I'm going to set up some links and email out the links there. You can download the files we had in the handout pod to you. This is part 2. It was not part 3 because we had some issues on the original first day where we tried to launch things where we couldn't get Ray on the audio, and you can't do this without having your presenter have audio. I will send out registration information for the remaining sessions. We appreciate your time on the webinar today very much. And there are some people that Ray's going to be following up with afterwards on questions that you would put in while he was still working his way through the material. So I hope that answers everything we needed to. Ray, thank you for your time today, and thank you to all of our attendees. So,
All right, thanks everybody, and have a great day. Let's talk to you
yes,
Thursday.
have a great rest of your day. Thank you.